Boardroom smelled like fresh coffee and printer toner, and I remember thinking that was a strange combination for the most important moment of my career. The chairwoman slid the offer letter across the polished walnut table like she was passing me a secret. Chief Financial Officer, 42 years old, youngest in the company's 106-year history. She told me the vote had been unanimous, that the board had been watching me for 3 years, that they wanted me to start the transition next Monday. I signed my name on the line and my hand didn't shake, which surprised me. I'd practiced it shaking the night before in the bathroom mirror just in case. When I walked out into the parking deck on level 4, the spring air felt different. Sharper, like I was breathing for the first time after holding my breath for a decade. I sat in my car for a full minute before I started the engine, just looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wanted to remember what my face looked like the moment before everything changed. I didn't know yet that everything was going to change, but not the way I thought. My husband's truck was already in the driveway when I pulled up to our house in the Highlands. That was unusual. He worked construction management and his crew didn't wrap until 5:30 most days, and it was barely 4. I sat in the car a second time, my offer letter in a manila folder on the passenger seat, and I felt the first small twist in my stomach that I now know was a warning. I ignored it. I'd been ignoring those twists for years. He was in the kitchen drinking a beer when I came in, not his usual after-work bottle. His third, judging by the empties already on the counter. He looked up at me and I held up the folder and I said with my whole heart that I had something to tell him. Something big? I asked him to put the bottle down for a second. He didn't put the bottle down. He said before I could even open the folder that his mother and his sister were moving in with us at the end of the month. That he'd already told them yes. That he'd already given them a key. He said it the way someone announces they ordered pizza. I stood there in my new pencil skirt and my best blouse with my offer letter folded against my chest, and I said his name. Just his name. And he looked at me and he said, and I will never in my life forget the flat tone he used, "What? Whatever you've got, it can wait." I told him I'd been made Chief Financial Officer. I said the title slowly, the way you'd say it to a child who needed to understand something important. He took a long pull of his beer and he set it down and he said, "Cool. Anyway, Mom's going to need the spare bedroom and my sister's taking the office." The office. My office. The one with my second monitor and my client files and the bookshelf I'd built myself the weekend after we closed on the house. I said, "Where am I supposed to work?" He said, "You can use the kitchen table." I want you to understand something. I had carried this man through 2 layoffs. I had paid off $31,000 of his credit card debt the year before we got married. I had co-signed on his truck. I had spent every Christmas of the last 8 years at his mother's house in Henderson because she didn't like to travel, and she had spent every one of those Christmases pretending I wasn't in the room. His sister, the older one, had borrowed $1,200 from me to fix her transmission 3 years ago and had never paid me back. And every time I saw her, she introduced me to people as my brother's wife, like I didn't have a name. I told him no, calmly. I told him no, we needed to sit down and have a real conversation, that this was a decision both of us had to make. I told him my mother had moved in with her sister when she got widowed and there were options. I told him our house was 3 bedrooms, that we talked about kids, that the office was already a room I used every single weekday. I told him I'd just been promoted to a position that was going to demand even more of my time and I needed that office. He stared at me. He drank his beer. And then he said the thing that I think I'll remember on my deathbed. He said, "I don't really care." He said it just like that. Casual. The way you'd say you don't really care what kind of bread the sandwich comes on. Like my whole life, the thing I'd built brick by brick since I was 22 years old was a sandwich choice. He grabbed his keys off the counter. He said he was going to pick them up now, that they'd already packed, that I'd better get used to the idea fast. He said when he got back I should have the office cleared out. He said it like he was assigning me a chore. He walked out the door and I heard the truck start and I heard him back out of the driveway and I stood in our kitchen for what must have been 10 minutes without moving. The clock on the microwave changed from 4017 to 4027 and I watched every minute pass. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. I remember a fly hitting the window and falling. And then something inside me, something I didn't even know I had, woke up. I went to the office first. Not to clear it out, I went to the office and I opened the safe in the floor of the closet, the one we'd installed when we moved in. I took out the deed to the house. I took out the title to my car. I took out my passport, my birth certificate, the bonds my grandmother had bought me when I was born, the original copy of our prenup that nobody but me and my lawyer remembered we had signed, and the small velvet box that held my grandmother's wedding ring. I called my best friend. She's an attorney. Family law. We've known each other since we were both interns at the same firm in 2009. I told her in about 90 seconds what had happened, and she said, in the voice she uses when she's already 3 steps ahead, that I needed to come to her house tonight. She said don't pack a bag. She said leave the car in the driveway. She said get an Uber and bring only what fits in your purse and the documents. She said she would be on the phone with 2 people I needed by the time I got there. I did exactly what she said. Before I left, I did one more thing. I went to our joint checking account on my phone, the one his paycheck and mine both went into, and I looked at the balance. 47,000 and change. I'd put 38 of those 47,000 in there myself over the previous 6 months because we were saving for a kitchen renovation. I moved 36,000 into my personal savings account, the one I'd opened in my own name 3 years ago after his mother told me at a Thanksgiving dinner that a real wife didn't need her own money. I left 11,000 in the joint account, enough that he wouldn't notice the second he opened the app, enough that he'd notice when he tried to use it. I called an Uber. While I waited, I unlocked the front door from the deadbolt so that when he came back with his mother and sister, they could let themselves in. I wanted them inside. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them to feel like they'd won. I rode 40 minutes across town with the manila folder still in my arms. The driver tried to make small talk and I think I answered him, but I don't remember what I said. I remember the streetlights coming on as the sky turned the color of a bruise. My best friend opened her door and pulled me inside, and there was already a glass of wine on her counter and a man I didn't know sitting at her kitchen table with a laptop open. He stood up when I came in. He introduced himself as a private investigator. She'd called him on the way to her own house from her office. He specialized in marital cases. He'd already started a file. I told them everything. I started with the boardroom that morning, and I worked my way to the deadbolt. I cried twice, and the second time was not because I was sad. It was because I was angry in a way I had never been angry in my entire life, and my body didn't know what to do with it except leak out of my face. My best friend asked me one question. She asked me if I wanted to save the marriage. I thought about it. I thought about the 8 years and the 31,000 and the Christmases in Henderson and the way he had said, I don't really care. I said no. She said, okay. Then we play it like that. The next 96 hours were the most surreal of my life. By noon the next day, I had given 2 weeks' notice on the lease of my company office and signed a 6-month lease on a corner suite in a co-working space downtown, 3 blocks from where I was about to start as CFO. By 2 in the afternoon, my belongings from the home office, the bookshelf and the monitor and the client files and a photograph of my late father, had been moved by a service my friend hired. By 4, the locksmith had been to my friend's house and made me a new set of car keys because she'd advised me to assume my husband had a copy of mine. By 6, I had a checking account with a credit union my husband didn't bank with, and my direct deposit from the company was rerouted. By 8, my friend had filed a petition for divorce in the county courthouse using the after-hours Dropbox. By midnight, the private investigator had pulled the security camera footage from the gas station 2 blocks from our house, which showed my husband and his sister filling a U-Haul trailer the previous Saturday, 3 full days before he had told me they were moving in. He had known for at least 4 days. He had planned it. He had let me come home with my offer letter, and he had still chosen to tell me the way he told me. My phone started ringing Tuesday morning at 6:14 a.m. I didn't answer. I had set up a Google Voice number the night before, given it to my friend, and turned my real phone face down in a drawer. The number of calls between 6:14 a.m. Tuesday and noon Wednesday was 87. The number of voicemails was 31. I listened to none of them. My friend listened to all of them. She took notes. She told me later that the first 10 were confused. The next 10 were furious. The next 10 were threatening. The last one, the 31st, recorded at 11:43 Wednesday morning, was him crying. Wednesday afternoon, the sheriff's office served him at our house with the divorce papers and the temporary protective order my friend had filed on the basis of the threatening voicemails. He was not allowed within 200 yards of me, of my new office, of my friend's house, of my mother's apartment, or of any place I was known to frequent. He was not allowed to contact me directly. All communication had to go through his attorney to mine. He hired an attorney by Friday, a guy I'll call the Bulldog because that's how he introduced himself in his first email to my friend. He was apparently expensive. I had a quiet, ugly little laugh about that one because the only money my husband had access to was the $11,000 left in our joint account, and whatever was in his personal checking, which I happened to know was around $2,400. The Bulldog's retainer, my friend told me, was usually $15,000. I found out later that his mother loaned him the retainer. The same mother who, 6 years ago, had told me at that Thanksgiving dinner that a real wife didn't need her own money. I thought about her sitting in our spare bedroom writing him a check. I thought about her in our kitchen. I thought about her opening our refrigerator. And I let it go, because there were bigger things to handle. The first hearing was the following Tuesday, 10 days after I'd signed my offer letter. I wore my new gray suit. I sat at the table with my friend on one side and the private investigator's report in a folder on the other. My husband walked in late, in a button-down that didn't fit him right, with his mother and his sister in the gallery behind him. They had dressed up. His sister was wearing pearls I'd never seen before. I wondered briefly whose they were. I wondered if they were mine, taken out of a drawer in my own bedroom. The judge was a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and the kind of patience that doesn't suffer fools. She read the petition. She read the temporary protective order. She read the Bulldog's response, which alleged that I had abandoned the marital home, that I had emptied joint accounts, that I had taken personal property belonging to my husband, and that the protective order had been obtained under false pretenses. My friend stood up. She entered into evidence the prenup, signed and notarized and never modified. The deed to the house, which was in my name only because I had bought it 18 months before we got married, and which the prenup explicitly excluded from marital property. The bank statement showing every dollar of the joint account, identifying which deposits had come from which paycheck for the previous 12 months. The receipts for the $31,000 in credit card debt I had paid down on his behalf in 2017. The receipts for his truck, in my name as co-signer, with the loan still active, and the audio file of voicemail number 23, which began with him calling me a word I will not say out loud in a video and ended with him saying, and I'm reading this from the transcript my friend put in front of me, "When I find you, I'm going to make sure you regret every single." She didn't have to play more than that. The judge looked at my husband for a long time. She looked at his mother in the gallery. She looked at his sister in the pearls, and she said in a voice as level as a kitchen counter that the protective order was upheld, that it was extended to 12 months, that the marital home, being separate property under the prenup, was mine and mine alone, and that my husband and any guests of his had 72 hours from the close of the hearing to vacate the premises, that the co-signed vehicle was being reclaimed by me pending sale, with the proceeds applied to outstanding marital debts, that the temporary spousal maintenance my husband had requested in his response was denied on the grounds of the prenup, and that, given the contents of the voicemails and the evidence of premeditated removal of marital property, the U-Haul footage, the court would be inclined to view future motions from his side with a great deal of skepticism. She banged the gavel. His mother stood up in the gallery and started to say something, and the bailiff told her to sit down, and she sat down. I have replayed that moment more times than I am proud of. We walked out of the courthouse, and my friend put her arm around my shoulders, and she said, "Lunch?" And I said, "Yes, somewhere with linen napkins." And we went. I'd love to tell you that was the end of it. It wasn't. He violated the protective order 4 days later. He showed up at my co-working space at 7:30 in the morning, before most of the building was awake, having somehow figured out where I was. Later I learned he'd gone through my mother, who had let slip the neighborhood without realizing why he was asking. He buzzed at the front desk. He told the receptionist he was my husband. She had been briefed. She told him very politely that she would call security. He started yelling. He told her she had no idea who he was. He said my name 11 times in an increasingly loud voice while she pressed the silent alarm under the desk. The police arrived in 7 minutes. He was arrested in the lobby. The protective order violation, combined with the language he used while being placed in handcuffs, which the lobby cameras recorded in full audio, became its own criminal matter. He spent 2 nights in county jail. His mother, again, paid the bond. His mother, by the way, was running out of money. The PI had found out that she had taken a home equity loan on her place in Henderson, the one she'd lived in for 35 years, to fund all of this. The Bulldog's retainer. The bond. A second retainer when the Bulldog withdrew from the case after the first violation, citing irreconcilable differences with his client. A third attorney, much cheaper, much less competent. I am not happy about any of this. I want to be clear. There is no part of me that takes satisfaction in a 68-year-old woman taking equity out of her house to defend a son who, the deeper we dug, turned out to have made an entire pattern of decisions his mother had financed her way out of. I felt sorry for her. I still do, but I did not feel responsible. The divorce was finalized 11 months later. He got nothing from the house because the house had never been his. He got the truck because we sold it and paid off the loan, and there was a small surplus, which went to him. He got his clothes, his tools, and a box of his late grandfather's books that I had been holding onto for him for years, and that I had my friend deliver to his mother's house via courier so I would never have to see him again. He did not get spousal support. He did not get any portion of my retirement account, which had been protected under the prenup. He did not get any portion of the CFO compensation package, which I had not yet received when I filed, and which the prenup also protected. The criminal case for the protective order violation resulted in a misdemeanor conviction and a fine, which his mother paid. His sister, the one who had borrowed the $1,200, sent me a Facebook message about 6 months into all of this. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph called me a series of names. The second paragraph said I'd ruined her brother. The third paragraph asked, and I am not making this up, if she could borrow money to make rent. I screenshot it. I sent it to my friend. We laughed for a long time. I did not respond. About a year after I signed my offer letter, after everything was done, after the divorce was final, after I'd repainted the bedroom and put new sheets on the bed and replaced the deadbolt twice for good measure, I sat on my back porch on a Sunday morning and I thought about the version of myself who had walked into that kitchen with the manila folder. I felt very, very tender toward her. She had been so hopeful. She had been so ready to celebrate. I went into the kitchen and I poured myself a coffee and I opened my laptop and I started writing a letter. Not to him, not to his mother, not to his sister, to her, to the woman with the folder. I told her she had done everything right. I told her her instinct, the one that twisted her stomach in the driveway, had been correct. I told her she was going to find out who her real friends were, and that the list was going to be shorter than she thought. But the people on it were going to show up in ways she had not imagined a human being could show up for another. I told her that the office she'd built with her own hands, the one with the bookshelf, was going to end up in a downtown suite with a view of the river, and that her name was going to be on the door. I told her that the worst day of her life was already in motion when she walked into that kitchen, and that she would survive it, and that on the other side of it she would be someone she actually recognized in the mirror. And then, because life has a sense of humor, I want to tell you what happened 6 months after the divorce was finalized. The company that had made me CFO was acquired by a larger firm out of Chicago. As part of the acquisition, I was offered a position as Chief Operating Officer of the combined entity. The compensation was almost 3 times what I had signed for in that boardroom. I had 90 days to decide. I took the offer. I sold the house in the Highlands. I bought a smaller place by the river, with a study that has a door that locks and a view of the water and a bookshelf I built myself the first weekend I moved in. I keep the manila folder in the top drawer of the desk. The original offer letter is still inside it. I take it out sometimes on hard days and I read my own signature, the signature where my hand didn't shake. I want to say one thing before I end this. To the woman watching who is sitting in a kitchen tonight with a folder in her hand and a husband who just told her he doesn't really care, he's not going to change. He told you who he was, believe him the first time, and then call your best friend? I've thought a lot, in the quiet of my new study by the river, about why everything unfolded the way it did. And the truth is, none of it was an accident. Every single thing that happened to me and every single thing I did in response was the natural ending of a long chain of small choices that came before it. My husband didn't wake up one morning and decide to dismiss me in our kitchen. He had been dismissing me for years in smaller ways I had taught myself not to see. The Thanksgivings where he let his mother talk over me, the credit card debt I paid off without ever asking him to thank me, the promotions he forgot to ask about. Every time I shrunk myself to keep the peace, I taught him that I would keep shrinking. The night he told me he didn't care was not the beginning of his disrespect. It was the harvest of a field I had been quietly watering for 8 years. And the choices I made that night, the quick clarity, the manila folder, the phone call to my friend, those didn't come out of nowhere either. I had been doing small, almost invisible things for a long time. Opening a savings account in my own name, keeping the prenup my mother had begged me to sign, maintaining a friendship with a woman who is both a sister to me and an attorney. None of it had felt like preparation at the time. It had felt like ordinary self-respect. But when the moment came, all of those small acts of dignity stood up at once and held me upright. This is what I want to leave you with. Character is not built in the crisis. Character is what's already there when the crisis arrives. The woman who walked out of that kitchen with the deed and the prenup and her grandmother's ring was not braver than the woman who walked in. She was just the same woman, finally permitted to act on everything she'd quietly known. If you are watching this and your stomach is twisting the way mine did in that driveway, listen to it. That feeling is not anxiety, it is intelligence. It is the part of you that has been keeping score honestly while the rest of you was being polite. Be honest with yourself about who is in your house. Keep one account in your own name even when someone tells you a real wife doesn't need one. Keep one friendship that exists outside the marriage. Keep your own work, your own bookshelf, your own signature steady on the line. These are not acts of distrust. They are the foundation on which any real love has to stand, because love without a self underneath it is just performance. And when the day comes that someone tells you, with a beer in his hand, that he doesn't really care, believe him. Then pick up the folder, call the friend, walk out the door. You are not abandoning the marriage. The marriage was already gone. You are walking toward yourself.